first. The board has decided to provide some financial support to Elden Gregory Middle School to refurbish and make well a number of musical instruments there. And it's important. We don't really start music education and music programs until the kids get in middle school, I think, right?
6th grade.
So there's no elementary program, so it makes the work that you're doing all the more important. And we have a $3,000 check for you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so
All right,
much.
take care.
We appreciate it a lot.
Let's see. Amber?
Tell us when a concert is.
Yes.
You're up, I think.
December 12th.
December 12th.
Yeah.
Oh, good thing it's not on the 11th.
All right, Dave is not here today, and I had this all printed out so I could see it better and then forgot it. So I had to call back to the office and send it to me. So Eliza Wilson's here today with JBarJ. She's part of the LOFT program, which I saw about, I think, a month ago, maybe a little bit more. It was on the news, and it was really exciting, the project they were talking about. And so I reached out to Eliza right away to try and see if we could get her on the speaker rotation. She's been in Central Oregon since 2002. She's been involved in all kinds of different things with families in need, veterans. I don't want to give away too much of her story, but she actually is very much can relate to the people that she's helping and connect with them to help bring services that they need and understand where they're coming from. So I'm excited to hear from her today. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for inviting me to come today. I brought a PowerPoint, as you can see. I don't know how much time I'll have or how much kind of background information you want, but I can kind of start by thank you for introducing me. But as she said, my name is Eliza Wilson, and I'm the Director of Runaway and Homeless Youth Services for JBarJ. And what that means is I support all of the programs for youth experiencing homelessness that are under JBarJ. And that's about 9 programs now. We're growing, we've been growing. JBarJ offers really a continuum of services in the Tri-County area, everything from prevention of homelessness with youth and family mediation, to shelter, both in host homes throughout the region, and then also in 3 different shelter programs locally. We do street outreach. We also now have a housing program. So as I said, JBarJ has 3 shelters. Probably the most well-known, that's been a long-term shelter of JBarJ, is the Loft, and it's in Bend. We serve 20 young people in that facility. Youth ages 14 to 24 can access short-term and long-term shelter. Sometimes we serve youth for years. As Ashley mentioned, your name is Ashley, right?
Amber, that's okay.
Amber, sorry. Amber mentioned, I have been involved with this work for a long time, but before working for JBarJ and other community partners, I was a youth who experienced homelessness in our area, and actually lived at the Loft for 3 years. So our long-term shelter is usually about 2 years, but for extenuating circumstances, we can really serve youth as long as they need, as long as they're under 24. All of our programs, because I'm limited on time, just to say, like, all of our shelter programs and our community programs provide long-term, like, case management, aftercare support, and life skills training for youth. So youth could be in our aftercare program, or getting support through our outreach services, or living in housing, and they all have access to the same supports, like case management, life skills groups. So we do those in the community, at the libraries, but we also do them in our shelters as well.
Are you just in questions as you go through? Or?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What kind of case management do you do for these kids? I mean, you make an effort to find out, well, obviously you must, make an
find out where they're from, what they're doing here, how long they've been here, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so we start out every interaction with young people like kind of doing an assessment. So we assess those things, like what their life history is, even medical history and family history. And it's really important to do that in the beginning so that if it is a possible thing for us to do reunification with family, because we are so limited on space in our shelters and in our programs that we want to prioritize placement for youth who don't have other options. So we definitely work on trying to reunify them with family, whether that's a guardian or like an aunt or other options.
Is
And
there a
then,
typical case? I mean, typical kind of kid that you end up, helping?
I would say it ranges from like some very young teens who maybe parents are kind of ill-equipped to support like different things going on in the home. A lot of times when we're working with youth, it's either like an abuse or a neglect situation at home, or it's that families are experiencing homelessness, and so because of that, there isn't really a home to go back to. A lot of times too, our young people are maybe exiting foster care, and so when a young person exits foster care, they don't have family to fall back on, they don't have rental history, they don't have really the resources and like protective factors that other young people do
So
have.
that would be more the 19-year-old kind of.
18 and up. Yeah, something like 60% of the youth that we serve have been in foster care. So Grandma's House is like my heart. I'm sure many of you know about Grandma's House. Grandma's House has not been a part of JBRJ a long time. It came under JBRJ in 2016, but it's a shelter for young families in Bend. We serve youth ages 14 to 24 who have small children or are pregnant. And again, long term, they can be there, but we really work with families and youth in looking for other options and getting them to like long-term sustainable housing. Canal House is our newest shelter. It's in Redmond, and it opened the 10th of January. It is off of Canal near the hospital, and it's a smaller program. It's really designed to be like a home, just like Grandma's House. It looks like a home from the outside and inside too, so 6 youth can live there, and we provide mostly emergency shelter, so short term, trying to get youth back home as well, but if that's a possibility. But really, it's nice to have something here in Redmond for youth so that they don't have to go to Bend to access support. So I kind of talked about how we have the emergency services. So that's like our family reunification program, mentorship, family mediation. And this is really the program that like kind of identifies what the needs are of youth and moves them back in, like either into shelter or back home, if that's an option. I also talked about how we do street outreach. We do that tri-county, and we're the only youth provider that does like youth-specific shelter and outreach in the region. And really today I'm here to talk about our housing program, so I wanted to kind of skip through that for those who didn't know about our other programs. In the last year or so, we've been really working to grow our housing program because at JBRJ we really know, just like any shelter, anyone who works with people experiencing homelessness, is that homelessness really is a housing issue at its core, right? There are other issues that contribute to young people experiencing homelessness, but they wouldn't be homeless if they had a house, right? So we've been really working to provide housing navigation and helping youth like access housing resources locally. That's kind of where we started. And then recently, in the last couple of years, we've partnered with Neighbor Impact for youth-specific housing subsidies. And so what that means is like for a short period of time, we'll provide rental subsidies for youth based on their income. So if they can afford to live on their own, then we wouldn't be paying it, right? So we're just paying a portion of the rent that they can't afford. And then we work with them on getting more income and kind of exiting out of that program so that they can then go on their own and they have, they have the ability to do this long term. So we provide like aftercare, case management, and support for those like 2 or so years that they're in that program.
All the kids have income?
No, they don't all have income. And so for the ones that don't have income, we get them into the apartment, and then, or like, for example, some of them are on Social Security because they're disabled.
Right.
Not many, but I would say probably 1/3 of youth that we work with are going to be disabled their whole lives. And so we work with them on, well, what can you do to increase income? For the ones that are not working, we work with them, connecting them to local, employers. We just did a job fair 2 weeks ago that was really successful. To kind of grow our housing program, I'm sure if you guys watch local news, you've heard about the Wilson Avenue program, or if you haven't, Deschutes County was awarded this property in like a local, grant application. And the commissioners decided it wasn't something that they wanted to continue after there was some kind of upset in the community about it being used for people who were on probation. And so it went back to the funder, and we applied to have this property be used instead for youth who have experienced homelessness. And so we would be the leaseholders, J-Bar-J, and then we would rent each room to the youth. And so that way they could gain rental history. Because a lot of times the huge barrier that youth have is they don't have any rental history. And they're competing with folks who have, years of rental history and great income locally. And so this is really meant to be a program that is like getting them on their way. Reducing their years. They can live there up to 3 years, but the goal really is for it to be like a year, and then we move on to something else in the community with the rental history that they have. The building is a 3-unit building, and so each of the units have 3 bedrooms, and how we decided it would be used is that 2 of them will be room share. Many people can't afford to live here locally, and have to share rooms with, share apartments and do room shares. Most of my staff do that, right? And so the 2 on this end will be there will be 3 youth who live in this building, and then 3 in that one, and then the other one will be for a youth family. And we've already selected the youth that will be going into the program once it's open for operation in the next couple of months. Yeah.
So I'm with Harcourts, and I know we supplied Christmas gifts to the loft.
Yeah.
Do you know if the owners know about the canal yet?
Oh, I don't, that's a good question. I don't think so.
Okay, I'll
Probably
talk
not,
to
because it
Erica.
was after
Okay.
Christmas. Yeah,
Okay.
that's a good question. So just like our other programs, this program, we're actually hiring a case manager to be there every day with the young people, and providing life skills and goals, and helping them get to job interviews and those types of things. So we think it'll be a really successful program, and we're really excited to start.
Is it functioning now?
No, so currently it's still under ownership of Deschutes County, but they're working on transferring ownership, and then, so I'm thinking that it'll probably be in 2 or 3 months. There were still some renovations that needed to be done, like the deck, for example, and so we're kind of waiting on that to finish. But the youth have been selected for the program, and so they know that they're going to be moving in. They actually keep emailing me and asking me if they can see it. So I need to connect with Deschutes County and ask them for the keys so I can take them on a tour.
How do you get these properties? Generally, they're given to you by companies, foundations, individuals?
That's a good question. So each kind of has a different story. This one, the governor funded Central Oregon for quite a bit of money. She gave Central Oregon because of our number of people experiencing homelessness in our PIT count. So every year we count people experiencing homelessness in the area, and we have some really high rates of unsheltered homelessness. That means we just don't have enough shelter for people to go into. And so because of our numbers in the state, we were one of 4 communities in the state to get funding. And so originally Deschutes County applied for this project out of that funding. And then when they said, you know, actually we're not going to continue, it went back to the same group of like the group that decides where the funding goes, and JBRJ applied for it. So that's how we got this one. The one that's here in Redmond was actually a property that we purchased with City of Redmond funds. So most of the funding we applied through their CBDG grant years ago. This was many years ago, and we've actually served. We had a family living there for some time until we decided like what could we do with it long term and how could we fund it long term. So we had a family who had experienced trafficking locally, and so her and her 5 children lived there for several years until we could kind of decide where we would find figure out where we would find the funding to operate it. And then the loft, I believe it was the same. So, yeah.
I have 2 questions. One is, do you guys have any idea how many of youth under 18 are homeless right now in this area?
That's a good question. We kind of have 2 ways to track that. So we look at the school district data, and I think last year it was just under 800. And then we look at who experienced homelessness in that year, not at one time, but throughout the year.
And that's all of Central Oregon?
Yes, that's all of Central Oregon. And then we do a better job, I would say, in Deschutes County tracking that. I think in Redmond it was something like 200. I could get that to you.
Well, the school district, part of the safe parking program, gave us a number that was 300.
Yeah,
for the city of Redmond and surrounding areas. So.
Yeah, because in the point in time count, we see like a couple hundred, but that's just what we can count that time. So the school's data is better. Yeah.
So with some of these being minors, are they, do they get help with being able to continue their education to make sure they get their diplomas, those types of things, and help them get copies of like their social security cards, birth certificates that they probably don't have access to?
Yeah, we work really closely with FAN and MIPKIN Evento liaisons, like in all of the school districts, on that, like keeping them in school and making sure, even if they, let's say, go to a shelter and then that they get transportation to Redmond to stay in their home school. So we do that pretty successfully locally, I would say. The birth certificates are tough. They're hard because, especially if they weren't born in this state. Oregon's easier than others, but you have to have. We oftentimes try to connect with the guardians. It can be really hard if they don't have we can't connect with the guardians to get the necessary things. Even if we could get a copy of like a driver's license from a parent, we can get a birth certificate. But it could be hard to do that. It's definitely a barrier for youth.
So, what's your success rate and how do you define success?
The second question you asked me, I would have asked you back if you asked me what my success rate is. How do you define success? That's a good question. I think we look at it, I'll answer the first one first. We look at success, how do I talk to my staff about it? We want to look at like each individual person and track like how they're doing from where they started and where are they at now, right? We have to do it that way because everyone's kind of on a different path. And being that we work with a lot of people who have disabilities, we can't compare everyone across the board. We have young people that we work with who leave our shelter and go to Portland State to live in the dorms and graduate early, because they are just, they just are gifted and with education. And we have young people that will be on Social Security their whole lives because they're disabled. So really we track success individually. When it comes to clients, when looking at the program, I track success on are we bringing youth in when they're reaching out for support, and are we doing that in a timely manner instead of having them sit outside, right? Like wait outside if we have an open bed. And then exits. Are we exiting to homelessness because they don't have anywhere to go? Or are we exiting them to a different shelter? Or are we exiting to housing? And so we really work hard to exit to housing or to a safe place. And so we do pretty well at that, but we could do better. So last year, for the loft, for example, 85% of the shelter exits were safe exits, so not homelessness. And I think, I don't have the data, it was like 20 youth we housed out of the loft last year. Grandma's house, it was a little higher for safe exits. It was like, I think 86%, and we housed like 25 youth. So that's kind of what we look at. I would say that we're very successful because we're working with young people and trying to intervene and provide support so they don't go on to become adults experiencing homelessness, which is the more visual crisis that the public is seeing. Yeah.
I'm assuming you're offering mental health counseling for the youth as well?
Yes, we connect them out. So we don't do that in-house, although we do groups, like coping groups and stuff like that. We outsource that. We work really closely with Deschutes County Behavioral Health and their team. So they have a youth team, and we're also in the process of hiring like a treatment manager, so that person would kind of oversee the mental health treatment for every youth that we work with.
And no drug abuse policy, of course.
We have a no drug policy. Absolutely, yes. No one is allowed to bring drugs on site. We don't keep youth from coming in if they have a drug issue, because we want to connect them to services so that they can get help.
To move on, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
Other questions, anybody? Tom?
What's your funding model with JRJ these days, meaning outside funding? I mean, how does that work?
Every one of our programs is funded separately, and so all the ones I just talked about have different budgets, and so we don't have like so we look for grants, like state and federal grants for each of our programs, because we definitely fall short at the end of the year. Like our housing program is really, the state of Oregon right now is funding it, but we're looking at like what could we do long term. And like Grandma's house, we get more funding from the community than we do from anywhere else. So it really just depends. But we're a nonprofit, and so every one of our departments kind of does like look for grants, community up to like federal grants.
Do you have any upcoming fundraising events or volunteer opportunities that you guys need help with?
That's a good question. Can I get back to you about that?
Yeah.
Thankfully, I'm not the one who has to coordinate that.
All right. John?
Real quick, can you talk briefly about what's your staff makeup and how many people are working there?
Yeah, JRJ as a whole has just about 200 staff total. But we do a lot of other things besides the things I just talked about. We also operate out of the juvenile department, working with youth who've been adjudicated locally. We do a lot of different things. My side, which is like the Runaway Homeless Youth Programs, we have just under 100 staff. And so we have a lot of laws and rules that we have to follow for shelter, so we have to have staff there. So for every 6 youth, we have to have 1 staff. So we have to have a pretty high ratio.
And JRJ is Central Oregon, right?
Yes, we're only in Central Oregon. Yep, we're local. We started in the 80s. Yeah.
Awesome. Anything else, folks? All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, thank
Fancy
you.
pen.
Thank you. I always need pens.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so
All right,
much.
thank you so much. Oh,
Yeah.
keep forgetting the bell, huh?
Ring that bell.
It's a nice tone.